The year is 2025, and well, things aren't looking great. The global economy is currently feeling flimsier than ever, and most of our wallets aren't feeling quite as fat as they should. In times like these, what we often need is some good old-fashioned escapism. Maybe we need to flip the script here to feel that sense of empowerment. Because what if I told you that you could be the one to put the capital in capitalism, to extract without effort and climb that societal ladder to become what could only be described as the final boss of the American dream? That's right, I'm talking about rent-seeking. Because I can't think of a more empowering, occupation in these trying times than that of a landlord. And Capcom looked to answer all the pressing questions that come with this line of work, like, how long can you ignore maintenance requests, and can I really just keep this security deposit? All the way back in 2001 with their PlayStation release of One Piece Mansion, not the anime. Now, maybe your ears perked up a bit when you heard the words 2001 and PlayStation, not followed by the number 2, as in that one gaming console, the PlayStation 2. And that'd be for good reason, because by the time of this game's release, we were well over a year into the PS2's lifespan. At this point, we not only had Tekken Tag Tournament, we had 2 Armored Core 2s. And while I understand that there were definitely some hits on the original PlayStation that released after the PS2's launch, having a July 2001 release for this admittedly simple game, it struck me as a bit of a head-scratcher. Anyway, this is a game designed to let you live out that capitalist fantasy. Sort of. The game has you assuming the role of apartment owner Pulpo as you try to manage your building and its various eclectic tenants. Stripping away its parasitic theming, One Piece Mansion, not the anime, is, at its core, a puzzle game. A pretty fun one, and also a pretty frenetic one. You know when you're playing Tetris and you've made a few mistakes to this point, and now the pieces have accumulated to a clear level of discomfort or maybe even panic, and it's definitely still possible to clear the pile and bring this game back, but the stress and the mental fray are making it difficult to make the right choices in this situation where one wrong choice spells the end of your entire run? Well, that's the sort of environment where this game thrives, and a position that I think it actively tries to keep the player in. There's always just one too many things being put onto your mental stack, too many fires that need to be put out at once, and oftentimes that's meant literally. And if you are feeling comfortable while playing, well then you're either a lot smarter than I am, which is like pretty plausible honestly, or you just need to give it a little bit for your well-oiled machine of a setup to find a way to completely go to shit. Even the game's layout is, I think, disorienting at a glance and can feel a little intimidating, but the core of it is really pretty simple. The name of the game is Tenant Management. Forget background checks, your goal is to bring in new tenants, keep the good ones, and make the ones you don't like so uncomfortable that they, don't re-sign their lease. All while you live the passive income dream and collect that sweet, sweet rent money at the end of each month. Each tenant has a stress level that shows how comfortable or not that they currently are, in addition to each having an influence on the stress of their neighbors, for better or for worse. Joe Dunk here likes to stress out his lower level neighbors with some good old late night indoor basketball practice. Ai-chan is a sweetheart that soothes neighbors in all directions around her, and I'll go ahead and tell you, she's definitely going to be one of your favorites. Shaggy is a beautician that does a bit of both as he relaxes his left and rightmost neighbors but stresses out those directly beneath. There's around 15 to 20 of these different tenants with unique effects that can occupy your building, and that's not including the game's villains, the Syndicate 5, who are about the worst tenants that you could imagine. These guys will occasionally occupy your building and basically try to ruin as many lives as they possibly can. Besides passively stressing out nearby residents, they'll also roam around the property and harass people on nearby floors. This little bastard in particular likes to commit some casual arson and set your residence on fire, which, needless to say, is a bit of a headache. When the Syndicate are on the roam, you'll have to enter security mode to leave your post and extinguish those fires and whistle those ne'er-do-wells back to their units. You'll have elevators to help you navigate to the upper floors for this purpose, and can place more elevator trek as needed in lieu of opening up more occupancy. Ultimately, your goal is to have these bad tenants permanently leave by strategically placing your more stressful tenants around their units until they decide they've had enough, while simultaneously juggling everyone else's stress to make sure you don't lose any of the good ones. Thankfully, you're able to swap the position of any of your non-syndicate tenants as you please at a small monetary cost, using what I assume must be some sort of loophole in residential law. I hope these tenants have a good lawyer. At the top right of your screen, you'll have a HUD that tracks the passage of time down to the week and to the month. At the end of every month, you'll naturally collect rent from all of your residing tenants, and anytime a tenant leaves, you'll lose a nice chunk of your current money. Fall below $0 and that's your fail state. Your landlording fantasy will come to an abrupt end. And that's pretty much all you need to know to be able to play the game. It's a constant balancing act of reorganizing your tenants so that nobody's too stressed, except for the syndicate, who you actively want to try to stress, all while bringing in a steady flow of new residents and making sure that no one in the building is being robbed or set on fire. And about this building, there's some real mixed messaging going on with it here. Despite this game being titled One Piece Mansion, not the anime, they clearly state in the opening cinematic that what you're managing here is an apartment building. Maybe this is splitting hairs, but that's a little different from what's suggested in the title and seems to have been a choice made during localization, as, to my knowledge, they do refer to the building as a mansion in the Japanese release. They also call it a mansion on the back of the North American jewel case, which leaves me further confused as to why and how they couldn't get their story straight. And even if they had stuck to their mansion guns here, what the hell even is this title? I've never lived in a mansion myself, but are they not inherently a single piece? And to address the pirate-themed elephant in the room, and so that I can stop adding my subtle disclaimer, the One Piece manga released in 1997. The anime began airing 2 years prior to this game's release. I mean, I'm sure One Piece wasn't yet the juggernaut that it is today, but even still, how on earth could a company, especially one in Japan, land on this name of all things? How do you not name this game literally anything else? Even the game's Wikipedia entry has to clarify in the first 2 sentences that it isn't related to the anime series. It's such an insane and poorly aged choice of title that it's almost admirable, and kind of adds a bit of an endearing mystique to the whole vibe of the game, or it did for me at least. Anyway, your means of rent seeking comes in 2 different flavors, story mode and endless mode. If you enjoy One Piece Mansion, then endless mode will definitely be where you end up spending most of your time, as the story mode is short. Really short. Like, this video could really just be a let's play if I wanted. You can probably finish it in under an hour. The story is simple and appropriately nonsensical. Your sister, Pudica, is abducted by a rival landlord who presents you with 7 challenges that you'll need to complete if you ever want to see her again. And with that simple premise, we're off to gatekeeping basic human necessities over the course of 7 stages. Each stage will have a slightly different goal that ultimately still encourages the same basic type of gameplay, whether it be to gain X number of tenants, raise Y amount of money, or build a tower to the heavens that's Z units high. It does a pretty good job of easing you in, with the last stage being the only one I found to have any real difficulty. I did have to retry it a time or 2 before I was able to clear it. Otherwise, endless mode is pretty much what it says on the tin. You choose from one of 3 difficulties, and then see how far you can last before you run out of money. It's more of a traditional puzzle game style mode in a game that isn't a very traditional style puzzler. It's a fun mode because, well, the game itself is pretty fun, and endless mode is this game in its rawest and greediest form. A+ Capcom, no notes. As one might expect from a Capcom title, the art direction here is great all around, with some nice detail and shading on the sprites, along with some smooth animations on most all of the characters. The tenants themselves are given plenty of character, and there's some nice theming going on between each character's visuals and their unique stress effects. However, there was what I found to be a pretty strange choice made with the sprites, or at least one that maybe didn't age as well as they'd expected. See, the sprites have this weird black border around them that I think may have been intended as a sort of primitive cell shading? I don't really know, it didn't make a ton of sense to me, and I felt it really made the characters clash with their environments. This choice left me further disoriented because, between that border and the smooth animations on the characters, there were times where I was left wondering if these were actually 3D models that just had really good texture work. I was regularly doing double takes and checking my own sanity, but eventually I came to realize that I think what they did here was render the characters as 3D models outside of the engine, snapshotted each of the animation frames, and then converted each frame into a sprite, essentially turning them from 3D into 2D, which would explain both the look of the sprites and the smoothness of the animation. Regardless, this is all pretty much a non-issue when playing at native resolution anyway, so despite me having played with some minor upscaling, maybe this isn't a fair criticism when considering the developer's intent. The game's music pretty much slaps, being what I can only describe as synthetic dial tone puzzlecore, though I mostly choose this word soup of a genre because I truly don't know how to describe it otherwise. I mean, it all hits my ears about right, and most of the tracks have an upbeat and mildly frenetic energy to them that subtly remind you that you're not good to let off the gas just yet. It's some good stuff, and my only real complaint is that you only get to hear one track in endless mode, which, while it is a different track per difficulty, I feel this really could have benefited from allowing the player to pick their music before starting. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty of the gameplay here. When you first start the story mode, you're greeted with a brief visual tutorial, but it doesn't quite fill in all of the gaps, and if you're going into the game blind, it'll probably be a few stages before you figure everything out. It's little things like knowing you can use the select button to hide the minimap that can otherwise cover some pretty important screen real estate. But once I realized this, I left it off for pretty much the entire game, although, looking at my notes, I didn't figure that one out until stage 4. You can also hold the circle button to display everyone's stress directions en masse, which is incredibly useful and really helps to make the game more manageable. There's also a minor but very annoying detail in that the game often utilizes cursor memory on your selection menu. Now, this is a pretty fast and manic game, and when you need to swap out the farting trash man for the dancing bath lady, you normally need to do it pretty quickly. And I had many instances where I'd muscle memory my way through the menu layout to do a quick swap only to accidentally select security mode or end up placing an elevator in a location that I was trying to move a new tenant into, because the cursor had defaulted to a different choice altogether. Why they made this decision, I don't know. There are only a maximum of 3 menu options at any given time, and it seems like it would clearly be better to just have it always start at the top. But this one little detail serves as the cherry on top of your cognitive overload to really make sure that you trip over yourself every now and then. The unhinged nature of the game can also lead to a real lack of finer attention from the player, or at least it did for me, to the point that I actually missed out on a pretty crucial mechanic for most of my time with the game. You see, when your tenants become too stressed out, they can have unique negative effects that last until they get evicted, or until you calm them down to a reasonable level. I distinctly remember looking along the upper floors of my one-piece mansion and saying to myself, I really don't remember signing a lease for a laser turret, but wouldn't ever have the time to figure out what was going on there, as I'd always find myself distracted by a more immediately pressing issue. This ended up being what happens to this cute little robot guy when he gets too stressed out, causing him to get a bit worked up. And honestly, understandable. We've all been there, buddy. Not all of the effects are this drastic, however. Ai-chan, for instance, simply shuts down and stops relaxing her nearby neighbors, a much more measured response to facing the horrors of reality. The game did make the clever design choice of, from what I could tell during the chaos, having your existing tenants occasionally pack their bags and leave of their own accord after staying for long enough. This makes it so that your lower levels don't just become totally settled and solved. If one of those tenants moves out and a syndicate member takes their place, then you're going to have to rethink your entire lower floor strategy. It helps to keep you on your toes. Oh, and also, the game makes this little noise whenever one of those syndicate members starts roaming out of their room. Now, there is usually too much going on to actually register that noise and respond appropriately, but it was regardless a thoughtful design choice. There's also an issue with late-game verticality of the mansion, especially in endless mode. When managing your building, Pulpo will dance his little ass off in this red room on the bottom floor, and if he's in manager mode for any meaningful amount of time, he'll immediately be transported back to it if he's away. Considering that you aren't able to relocate this room, or at least I couldn't figure out a way to, It starts to become a real issue when your building has 7th, 8th, or even higher floors because A, it's very difficult to tell what's going on up that high, and B, if and when you need to deal with troublemakers, it's a long ride up, made even longer when considering that the elevator has to be called back down to your current floor. I get that this was all probably intended and baked into the difficulty, but I do wish there had been more options to handle this, because honestly, at a certain point, trying to deal with your upper floors starts to become pretty annoying. It's one thing when your own mental capacity is your limiting factor for success, but it's a lot less fun when you feel hamstrung due to a sheer lack of mobility. This is a situation, however, where it actually does help to leave that minimap enabled, especially when playing on hard mode where your building is only 4 rooms wide anyway and it won't obstruct any of the gameplay. All this being said, this game is still super fun, and in fact, my biggest complaint with the game is just that there isn't enough of it. Despite there often being a lot going on at any one point, it still felt like there was a ton of room for exploration here. More modes, more characters, more player options, multiplayer, bigger and more buildings and different types of buildings. Like, it's the type of game where I could see a sequel really growing the concept. But with this game now being old enough to drink, and Capcom having already abandoned far more successful IPs than this, I'm not holding my breath for a sequel anytime soon. But hey, new Okami is on the way, so anything's possible, I guess. Anyway, that's all I've got for One Piece Mansion. It's pretty dang fun, and if you like puzzle games, you'll probably have a good-ass time with it. And if you like this video, feel free to subscribe, as we've definitely still got some more coming down the pipeline. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Peace!